Okay, here we go. Now we're recording. So Microsoft SharePoint, a couple different ways to get into it. As with anything with Microsoft, you can do it a multitude of different ways. One is to get to it through Teams. Another way is to get through it directly from your SharePoint sites. So if I look at my Office 365 portal, which is what this is up here, I can click on SharePoint. All of my SharePoint sites open in a little web page, and it looks kind of like this. For this one, I'm just looking at the training site that we've set up for us. And I'm going to go over just the generics here, and then I'll show you how to hook this into Teams and then be able to go back and forth and why you'd want a SharePoint site to begin with. So more often than not, your SharePoint site's going to go hand in hand with Teams anyway. A lot of times you're going to use Teams as your way to do document security inside of SharePoint. Doesn't necessarily mean that you have to. It's just that if you've already started with Teams, that's probably how it's going to get set up. So from there, SharePoint is one of the 3 fundamental pieces of Office 365 for the kind of the triad of things that we use. We use Exchange, which is your email system, Teams, which does a lot of the audio, video, communication meeting section, and then SharePoint handles files. So that said, a couple different ways of looking at it again, and we're going to take a look at the portal version right now. So this is the training group. We know that it's a private group. In other words, you have to be invited to it because it's going to tell us that right here. And again, you guys can see my screen, yes?
Yeah. Yes.
Okay, because my little green doohickey has gone away. That's how I know which screen is up. So it is a private group. Anytime something changes inside of this group, I know I'm going to get some type of notification, and I know that because this little following thing here has this little star on it. If I turn that off, it tells me I'm not following it. I'll no longer get notifications when people post inside of the training SharePoint site. So I do want to get notifications for that. So I turn that back on. I know it has 6 members because it tells me that. If I want to find out who those 6 members are, I can find out right down through here. Dan Flint's actually a member, so if he wanted to jump in, he could be. If I want to add members, I can add members directly through here as well. Over on the left-hand side, what we are looking at right now, this is the home screen, this middle section. Basically, this is a web page, so we're setting it up to look kind of like a web page as well. I know for those of you at Lower Allen, when you were in the initial, here's all the different pieces, parts of Office 365, and I said, hey, I can tell you kind of what SharePoint does, but I can't tell you how you're going to use it. This is one of the reasons that I can't tell you exactly how you're going to use it, because literally you can design it the way that you want it to be. And this is how you start designing these pieces, parts. By default, you get a new section inside of here. You get some quick links where your documents are and any recent activity. On the left-hand side of the screen, you get all of these by default. And what these are, conversations. This actually takes us into Outlook, and it'll show you anytime this particular SharePoint site is mentioned inside of your email messages. So if you do, at training, that would actually show up in those conversations because you're tagging in that training group. All of those people will get information, and it would actually go as an email as well. So that's what those do. Documents are documents. Kind of looks like the files list. And that really is what you're looking at here. Any of the documents that you have available to you are inside of that documents list. You can add new ones or new folders, whatever you want to do here, just by clicking on the new. If you do a folder, just click on folder, give the folder a name, and then you can start adding things to the folder. Upload allows you to upload your files. Quick edit allows you to edit any of the information that's in there. I'm gonna exit back out of there. Sync allows you to sync things down to your PC. So it's just on your PC. I would advise against doing that for a little while until you get used to how SharePoint works, so that you're not syncing things down to your PC and other people don't know that you've done that, so that you're basically not removing a piece of SharePoint out for your own personal use and then pushing it back later on. You can export information out to Excel if you need to, and there are also Power Apps I'm not going to get into, and we'll do that another time. And then there are other things that you can do from here as well. You can add things into flows. We talked about Microsoft Flow a little bit, and basically that's just a way to automate some pieces, but anything that you have inside of SharePoint you can add to flows. You can also filter if you need to. If there's details about certain things that you need to know, and again, a lot of that's going to have to do with versioning later on. And then if you need to expand the content, you can. So that's what those do. The Shared with Us tab, if anybody on any other team has shared something with this team, it will come in here. Doesn't live in here, but it's a file that's been shared with you, or a folder that's been shared with you that lives somewhere else. The notebook, believe it or not, actually is OneNote. So you can get to OneNote directly from inside of SharePoint. So anything having to do with that particular SharePoint site or group, you can put into OneNote. And you can access that from Teams as well. Let's go back to where we were. So pages are pages, and they're essentially web pages. You get the home page by default, and then you can start creating new ones if you need to. Again, I'm not going to do that for today, but if you guys want to do a specialized class on that, I'll be more than happy to do that. This piece here is actually a page that I made earlier. Isn't it pretty? So basically all I did was just throw a page together. It's actually on the home page. You can see it right here. It's at SharePoint training on Tuesday. It's not nearly as pretty on the home page, but I can get to that through here. You can do with it what you want. This is just the default one, how it came in. But basically you're creating a web page, and why would you want to bother to do that? If you are creating information for people that are accessing your SharePoint site, you can do it in a visual manner. This is one of the ways that you can do it. If you have news coming in, let's say you have a project running and some of the additional information that you need to have at people's fingertips can be made available inside of that news section. Once it's in there, you can send that information to them by email. Promote it actually means that you can do a couple different things with it. You can email it, you can save it as a template, you can add it to page navigation, which is something that I did over here, which is that page navigation. Again, this is just one of those, you can do all kinds of really cool things with SharePoint, but it's a matter of what makes sense for you and your group. The contents just lists the contents of that particular SharePoint site. In this case, it's going to look a lot like the team stuff that we saw before. It's the documents, it's the form templates that we have there, it's the wiki data. I made up a test list earlier, so that's available there and all of your site pages. So it's a little bit more data than Teams has, just in a different way of viewing it. That's all there is to it. Recycle bin really is that. You can delete out things that go in your recycle bin, so if you need to rescue them, they're available there. Sorry, I'm watching Dave like trade headsets and doing weird stuff, and it's very distracting. He's looking at me like, what?
All the time?
I know, right? He's very distracting. All right, so that's the pieces over here. Any questions on the navigation menu on the side?
Don?
Yep.
So if we were, in the future migrating as all of our files, like our file storage into SharePoint, that would be under that Documents tab there?
It can be, yes. The thing to keep in mind when we're talking about moving files from where they are now to where they are going to live later on is all about the security of the document. So things that are in HR, we don't want to have just out for everybody. Obviously, we'd have a team that has very specific members, that kind of thing. So when we talk about moving files, like we did for you guys, just like, okay, here's all these files. We know all of you can have access to them, so no big deal. We're just going to plop them in this spot. Fantastic. So I know I'm answering more than the question that you asked, but yes, we're going to move things from point A to point B. But yes, we need to figure out if we're going to do it by team or by SharePoint site, because they don't necessarily have to be one and the same, but they can be connected.
Mhm.
And what security goes along with that. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was thinking it would be like say the whole B and Z folder
Sure.
in there.
Yeah, and then it's just a question of, do you want a specific team for that, or do you just want it to be a channel inside of CED?
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay.
What makes sense? So it's just things to think about for later on.
Yeah. And okay, good.
No, go ahead.
And another topic question.
Okay.
On that sync, I know you said don't try the syncing yet, but for general information, would that be if we put files into the OneDrive and then need to put them back in here? Is that what the syncing is?
You can do it that way. The other thing you can do is, if you know you're going offline for any length of time, let's say that you know you're going out to a site and you need some information to take to a site.
Mm-hmm.
You can sync that down to your PC, and then when you come back, you can sync it back in.
Okay. Thanks.
Other questions? Or are you good for now?
That's all.
Oh, okay. All right.
Hi, Don. It's Maggie.
Hey.
I had a quick question.
Sure.
Could you explain flow a little bit more in detail?
Absolutely. So flow is workflow automation.
Okay.
It does a gazillion different things. So as it revolves here, let's say that you want to create a flow for when you have documents that come into one of your meeting sections or your agendas or things like that. As people post it, maybe you have a workflow that sends out, a specific email to those people, or it does something else. So A has happened, and now after that happens, I want B to follow it, and then C to happen after that. That's
Okay.
what flow enables to
This
happen.
might be helpful for like our ZHB process or for other board processes. So.
Exactly. And especially if you have a very specifically defined set of circumstances that happen and a very specific flow of things that we can make happen, you can use flow to automate all of that.
Okay. Maybe would it be helpful that you could probably do like a training just specifically on flow and
Yep.
creating flows? Okay, because we actually Stacy and I were working on something like that for ZHB because we have certain activities that happen like in ZHB. For example, the public hearing notices have to go on a certain date and that type of thing.
Yep.
Agenda.
Yeah, and I know we had talked about some of that, and yeah, absolutely.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yep.
We need all the help we can get.
Well, like I said, if it'll automate it and do it for
Yeah.
you, let's do
Yeah.
that. So that all you have to do is like finish out the actual document and dump it into a folder, and then it kind of like takes over from there. Hooray.
Oh, yeah, because like with the teams and stuff, like setting up the planning commission and zoning hearing board, it's just nice to get a little reminder in your email that, hey, the deadline's coming up, don't forget. So if we do that for, it's like, oh yeah, thanks, because you get busy doing other things and you're like, oh, I'm glad that I put this in Teams.
Yeah,
Yeah,
exactly.
perfect.
Yeah, and then I would suggest that you guys look at flow when you have a chance, and you can look at it directly off of here.
Yeah, I remember you talking about it when you did that training up in the EOC months ago. You talked a
Yeah.
little bit about it, but yeah, it's a lot of information. So yeah,
It is. It's a ton of information. The good news, when you actually go into flow, wherever it is here, I'm probably looking straight at it and can't find it.
I see.
I think they're calling it Power Automate now.
Oh,
So 2 days ago, Microsoft changed absolutely every naming convention that they have again on all of their products. So don't be surprised if things change a little bit inside of here too, because like everything has changed to a different name. It's awesome. Yeah, it is Power Automate now. David just confirmed that for me. So inside of there are a ton of workflows that you have available to you. And I think it just changed my site there. Yep. And some of them come in by default. So I would take a look at some of the ones that are pre-made for you. One of them that I would absolutely suggest that you get is called Have I Been Pwned? And that's the one that checks the dark web for your email address and passwords.
Wait, what?
Yeah, I know, right? It's called Have I Been Pwned? PWND, I think. But there's actually a flow for that, and it's a default one. So what it does is it checks that website as often as you tell it to make sure that none of your passwords and or email addresses that they are associated with have been compromised.
Oh.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. WebRoot does the same thing, so I actually check your work ones, but you might want to check your personal ones on there. So that's those. Did that ever load? Yeah, here it is. So there they are. There's a bunch of them in here. So there's some of the default ones. There it is. There's the Have I Been Pwned flow notification. So it's under social media, and it's one of the default ones.
I definitely wouldn't have spelled it right. I'm glad to
Yes,
see it.
that's so
Yeah.
weird. Doesn't even look like a word.
No, it doesn't.
Yeah.
I wrote down PONED, so
Yeah.
before I saw that.
So yeah, so it goes out, it checks the website, sees if there's any notifications, and then it emails you, which is
Okay.
kind of cool.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, see how that one works, test it out, and then you can start playing with some of the other ones. And then once you have a template and figure out how they work, then you can start building your own flows. But yeah, I'll absolutely do a class on that. All right. Other questions before I keep going?
Nope.
Nope.
Okay. So then inside of the SharePoint site itself, if you want to add things, again, mentioned this earlier, you can click on New, add whatever you want. Let's say we want to have a list in here. I create a list. Yes, I know. Thanks, Ted. I don't need that right now. Things I don't need. If I want it to show up in my site navigation, it'll go over on the left-hand side of the screen. I can create that. Takes a minute.
Oh, yeah.
And I now have a list. And then I can start making a list of things that I don't need. Let's see here.
Head talk.
Yep. There we go. Notifications from Ted. If I have an attachment, I add my attachment to it, save it, and away I go. And then much like Planner, you can keep adding columns to things, change your titles if you want to change the title. You can filter, you can total, which is kind of nice. So this will also do a little bit of adding and subtracting for you if you need to do that, and it will count. The other thing you can do here is export to Excel. So if you have data in here that would be helpful in an Excel spreadsheet, you can export it directly from here. If you need to add it to a flow, you can add it to a flow, which is pretty nifty. Somebody sending me. All right. Another suggestion for dark web info. I actually do have a full session on our YouTube channel called Defense Against the Dark Arts for the dark web stuff. It's actually a 4-part series. It's 4 hours long total, but it goes into basically cybersecurity and anti-phishing and dark web and all kinds of fun stuff. So it's actually worth it to go through it, especially right now. All right, so
Where
that's
did you
what
say it
Listserv.
was?
It's on our YouTube site. I'll send all that information out to you guys. In fact, I'm just finishing up our newsletter. Did you guys all get the newsletter?
I don't think I do.
I
Yeah, I
don't.
do.
I don't get it.
I don't, Dawn.
Okay.
If you sign up for a webinar, I think because I signed up for a webinar a couple months ago, I started getting it. So
Okay.
of course it goes into my other file, not my focus.
Yeah, I know, right? Yeah, I'll make sure that you all get a copy of it.
Great.
Thank you.
Yep, no problem. And then that'll have the YouTube channel on it, and then you can go from there and take a look at everything that we've got. All right. So there was that, setting up lists. Other things that we can do. If you have multiple document libraries, you can do that from inside of SharePoint. So even though everybody has access to it, maybe they're completely different topics or completely separate things, you can do multiple document libraries. If you want to put additional pages in here, you can do that. News posts, news links. Do you guys remember plans from when we were looking at Teams?
A little.
I
Little
don't
bit.
know.
All right, so let's take a look at plan. Actually, we have an existing one that's already set up. So I'm going to click on existing plan because that's the one that we already have in Teams. We're not going to use Noah's plan because Noah's plan is kind of silly. We're going to use the training plan. I'm going to click create and it shows up over here. Oh, and look there. There's our plan that we had previously. And that's where we can enter tasks and so on and so forth. I know we did that for some of the hearing boards that you guys were working on. So that was
Yeah.
one of the things that we had. So.
Yeah.
So you can actually attach pieces from Teams inside of here. So again, this is just a separate way of looking at things, or you can create completely new plans, either way. So there's that. Other things that we can do. Oops, quick. If we want to have additional information posted on here. So like I did this one this morning, a cute little news post. It's pretty, yay. I can either add directly from here, or I can add from here, but either way, it'll allow you to add news, either a post or a link. So if I want to do a new post, I can decide whether it's blank and not all that exciting. If I want to do visual ones, I can do visual ones, which looks like the one that we just did up there. Or they have just basic text ones as well, looks like that. And all you have to do is put the information in, and it kind of walks you through that. So you just create your page, type in your news post, edit the blocks that are here. Once you're finished, if you want comments turned on, leave it on. If not, you can turn it off because, sometimes people are annoying and turning off the contents is the way to go. Once you're finished, all you have to do is click post news and it'll show up. Oh, name can't be blank, so I actually have to give it a name. All right, there we go. Post our news and it'll show up on our page here. So that's one way of working with SharePoint. And again, whether you guys decide to do it that way or come in through Teams, which is the next one I'm going to show you, totally up to you. So get rid of that, get rid of that. I'm going to bring Teams up here. I'm going to click on here. Let's say that we want to bring in SharePoint. We can do that from here. I'm going to bring in SharePoint. Did you guys see how I got there?
Mm-hmm.
Okay.
Yeah.
And then it's just a matter of what do I want to get attached to? Do I want to get attached to home? Do I want to get attached to news? Do I want to get attached to something very specific? I want to get attached to the home page because I want to be able to see pretty much exactly what I saw on the home page for my SharePoint site. Do I need to post to the channel? Sure, why not? Because otherwise people won't realize that I have posted this in here. So I'm going to save that. I now see my home site. Oh, it looks exactly like it did on the SharePoint site. So that's one way of doing it. The other way is if you just need the documents and you don't need all the extra stuff. If you're really not using all the other pieces for SharePoint right now, you can just pull in your document library. Which one do I want? Well, I just want the training one. So I can pull that in, pull it in. There it goes. This is all I'm getting. Just want my documents. I'm gonna call it document library. So any of the documents would be in here. Now, essentially, when I brought CED stuff in, this is pretty much exactly what I did. I created a new document library and hooked it in. That's it. So that's what you see. So just different ways of getting at things, however you want to do it, totally up to you. This way is a visual way of getting to it. So anything that's in here, like if I want to get out my documents, I can get at it that way. Go back to documents. I know there's one in general. There's one document here. I can go to document library. I can click on general. There's one document there. So again, however you want to get at it, completely up to you. Whatever makes sense, whatever you like.
So then if you have that, what's the difference in having a document library and then posting things to the file section of Teams? Just security?
So the document library, the stuff that's in files, even though Teams does make its own little SharePoint site for it, it's not as pretty as this version is. So it's just different ways of doing things. I know it seems like it's repetitive.
Well, and I don't know that we have a home. Do we have a home on ours?
No, because I just did a document library for you guys.
Okay. Okay. So because we created a team and we have a post, and I feel like that's kind of like our home base, I guess, like our landing where everyone's kind of going to get information.
It is. If you go in through the Office 365 portal, you should be able to see the CED team from there.
Yeah.
And then be able to create a home site. But again, however you want to do it, completely up to you guys. The other nice thing that I didn't show you, and I probably should have, let's see here. There are different options that you have available to you through apps with the Teams site that you don't have quite as much inside of Teams. So what you have available to you, these are all the default ones. So if you want to do forms on that homepage, you can do forms on that homepage. If you want to have a calendar in that homepage, you can have a calendar in there. There's all kinds of cool stuff that you can do with SharePoint that it's a little wonkier to do inside of Teams. It's just a little bit nicer to see on that homepage. So these are all available to you. And then you also have the availability to go to the SharePoint store and add in a gazillion other different options. If this loads, I had some issues with this loading earlier today. There's plenty of free things. Like this is a free one, which is an employee directory. I saw one that was a check-in, check-out board, which might be helpful for CED. That was also a free one. See if it'll load here. So I would also look through some of these to see if any of these would be helpful, because I think you'll find that some of them will be. Wish I could find that one. There's employee leave management with manager approval. I know that's something Lower Allen's been looking for forever and a day. So that one might be helpful for you guys as well. But again, you'll have to try it out, see what works, see what doesn't. Questions so far? All right, I'm gonna go with no for now.
Sorry.
That's okay.
Mhm.
So what I wanna do is kind of set you guys loose with what you have and let you play with it a little bit. and then maybe come back around to this again and answer more questions. Whether we do it during, an advanced Outlook training or whatever, it doesn't really matter to me, or once we do flow or whatever. But until you play with it, I don't know that you're going to have a ton of questions. So I want to make sure that you have a chance to kind of play with it a little bit and see what all it can do. I started playing with this a couple days ago, and I was like, we've been doing this wrong the entire time. But it's not so much that we've been doing it wrong, it's just that it does so much more than even I was realizing once you start playing with it.
Okay, thank you, Dawn.
Yep,
Thank you, Dawn.
absolutely.
Thank
Thanks,
you.
Dawn.
Yep, I'll hang out for a little bit if anybody has any other questions or anything, and I can go through them one-on-one if you need to.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, all right, see ya.
Thanks, Dawn.
Yep.
Dawn.
See you later.
Oh.